We take the raw lead of everyday life and turn it into the cinematic gold of storytelling excellence. Experience the magic of narrative alchemy as we transform pain into power and loss into legacy. Subscribe today and witness the transformation in every new video.
On a Tuesday morning in March, my daughter-in-law stood in the kitchen I had cooked in for 31 years and told me, in the gentlest voice she could manage, that it might be time to think about my options. "You've worked so hard your whole life," she said, stirring her oat milk into her coffee like she was performing a ritual. "Don't you think you deserve to rest somewhere that's actually designed for someone in your situation? Someone in my situation." I was 64 years old. I had run 5 miles every Saturday morning for the past decade. I had buried a husband, raised a daughter, and kept a 4-bedroom house in Decatur, Georgia from falling apart for 31 years. But in her eyes, I had a situation. I was a situation. I set down my fork and looked at her. This woman my son had married 2 years ago. This woman who had moved into my house 8 months ago on account of their temporary financial restructuring. And I said, "You're probably right, sweetheart. Let me think on that." Then I finished my eggs, rinsed my plate, and went upstairs to my bedroom to think. 3 months later, I was sitting on the terrace of an apartment in Lisbon, Portugal, watching fishing boats move across the Tagus River while drinking the best coffee I had ever tasted in my life, and my phone was ringing for the 11th time that week. My son, calling from the house that used to be mine. I let it go to voicemail, but I am getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, because the beginning matters. It always does. My name is Albertine Louise Mosley. My mama named me after her grandmother, and my daddy called me Bertie from the day I was born, because he said I came into this world singing. I spent 32 years as a registered nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia, which means I have held people's hands while they were dying, argued with insurance companies at midnight, and worked Christmas morning more times than I can count. I mention this not to brag, but because my daughter-in-law once described me to her sister on the phone as someone who never really had a career, just a job. She said this while sitting in my living room, wearing athleisure that cost more than my first car. My husband, Theodore, Teddy to me, died 19 months before that Tuesday morning. Pancreatic cancer, the same thing that took my father. We had 38 years together, Teddy and I. He was a quiet man, a civil engineer, the kind of person who would spend 3 weekends fixing a neighbor's leaky pipe just because nobody else knew how. He was not perfect. Lord knows he was not perfect. There were years when the drinking got bad, years when I slept in the guest room and prayed and thought about leaving. But he got sober at 52, joined a men's group at our church, became the man I had known he could be. We had 13 good years at the end, and when the cancer came, he faced it clean and clear-eyed, and I was there for every day of it. 2 weeks before he died, he took my hand and said, "Bertie, the safe behind the bookshelf. The combination is the date we got sober together." He meant the day he got sober, January 11th, 1997. But he always said "we" because he knew I had gotten through it alongside him. I didn't open the safe for 9 months. I was too busy grieving. My son, Wesley, he was 35 when Teddy died, flew home from Phoenix for the funeral and stayed for a week. He was sweet that week. He cleaned out the garage, made grocery runs, sat with me in the evenings. His wife, Kayla, came 2 days in. She was polished and thin and said the right things at the funeral. She had grown up in Connecticut, worked in digital marketing, and had a gift for making you feel vaguely managed. "We're going to make sure you're taken care of," she told me at the reception, holding my hand with both of hers. I thanked her. I thought she meant emotionally. For the first year, Wesley called every Sunday. He flew down for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Things were quiet. I rattled around the house some, but I had my church friends in my garden and my neighbor Peggy, who came over every Friday with wine and opinions. Life was manageable, even in the grief. Then, in the spring, Wesley called on a Wednesday, which was unusual. "Mama," he said, "I've got something I need to ask you." He explained that his company had done a round of layoffs. He still had his job, but things were uncertain, and Kayla's freelance contracts had dried up, and they had been renting in Phoenix, and the rent had just jumped $400, and they needed time to save. "Just 6 months," he said. 8 at the outside. They would help with utilities and groceries. They would be no trouble. I said yes before he finished the sentence. They moved in May 12th, a Saturday. Wesley came with a U-Haul. Kayla came with her own car packed to the headliner with what she called her work equipment, ring lights, Backdrop stands, a full-length mirror, a rolling rack of clothes. My sewing room, where I had quilted for 20 years, where Teddy's mother had taught me to embroider, became her content studio within 2 weeks. My grandmother's Singer sewing machine went to the basement. "It's just temporary," she said. "We'll be totally out of your hair." That was 18 months ago. The changes came slowly enough that I almost didn't notice them. Almost. The kitchen schedule shifted first. Kayla did her intermittent fasting window from 11 to 7, which meant she didn't want food smells in the morning, which meant could I maybe do my cooking a little later. I had cooked breakfast at 7 a.m. every day of my adult life. I moved it to 9. Wesley said nothing. Then the living room. Kayla did brand partnership videos in the living room. And the afternoon light was essential. And could I maybe keep the blinds positioned a certain way? And also the family photos on the wall created a branded inconsistency that her sponsors had flagged. My wedding portrait, the one where Teddy is looking at me like I am the best thing he has ever seen, went into a box. A ring light went up where it had been. Then the garden. I had a half-acre garden in the back. Tomatoes, collard greens, herbs, 4 rose bushes Teddy had planted for my 50th birthday. Kayla's sponsored content sometimes required natural outdoor footage, and the garden was too chaotic for the aesthetic she needed. Could I maybe trim things back? Keep the beds more defined? I trimmed the rose bushes. I kept my mouth shut. Money was the undertow pulling at everything. Wesley said they were saving for a down payment. They paid $400 a month toward groceries. The mortgage on the house was $2,100. Utilities ran $400. Taxes, insurance, maintenance, another $600. I was covering $3,000 a month. They were contributing $400. I had done the math on a notepad one night, and then folded the paper and tucked it in my Bible and tried to be grateful that my child was not sleeping on the street. The night I truly understood what was happening, I was supposed to be asleep. It was a Thursday. I had gotten up for water around midnight and heard Kayla's voice from the guest room, bright and animated, the way she got when she was excited. I stood in the hallway. "It's literally perfect," she was saying. "Free housing, utilities covered, she cooks." I know. She's fine, she's healthy, she's not like infirm. But eventually that becomes our issue, right? The stairs alone. We're going to have to figure something out. The Brookhaven place has really good reviews. My friend's grandmother moved there and genuinely loves it. They have, wait, let me pull it up. They have a wellness center, group fitness, social events, their own little apartment. She would thrive. And honestly, she'd probably be relieved to not be in this big house alone. She was not talking to Wesley. I pressed my back against the wall. "We've already talked to a realtor," she continued. "Just exploratory. But the comps in this neighborhood are wild right now. If we could get her to agree to sell, we'd split the proceeds, get ourselves into something in Brookhaven. Fresh start. New kitchen. Finally. She's reasonable, you know. She wouldn't fight it. I walked back to my room, filled a glass of water in the bathroom sink, and sat on the edge of Teddy's side of the bed. The side where he used to sleep. The side I still hadn't washed the pillow on. I felt something crystallize in my chest. Not anger exactly. Something colder and cleaner than anger. I thought about the safe behind the bookshelf. The next morning, I waited until Wesley and Kayla left for their co-working space. They went every Tuesday and Thursday, which I appreciated. And I went to the bookshelf in Teddy's old study. Reached behind the encyclopedia set we'd had since 1989. Found the door. Turned the dial to January 11, 1997. Inside was a metal box, and inside the box was a letter. His handwriting, careful and slanted, the way he always wrote when something mattered. "Bertie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope you waited long enough that the grief has settled some. I hope Peggy has been bringing wine. I need to tell you something I should have told you years ago. I was ashamed to, at first. Then I just wanted to see your face when you found it. You know I was bad with money before I got sober. What you don't know is that after I got sober, I became a different kind of man about it. I talked to a financial planner at the credit union. George Sims, good man. He's retired now, but his number is on the card attached. And I started doing things quietly so I couldn't second-guess myself. The life insurance policy is $920,000. Policy number is on the card. Call MetLife first. They've been waiting. The investment account at Fidelity, $710,000. Started in 1999. Never touched it. Account numbers attached. The IRA, $380,000. Also Fidelity. Combined, you have $1,090,000 in investment account. The duplex on Glenwood Avenue I bought in 2003 through Mosley Holdings LLC. You knew I had a rental property. You didn't know I never touched the income. It has been accumulating in a separate account for 16 years. The property manager is a woman named Sandra Hill. Her number is attached. The property is worth approximately $290,000 by 2020 estimates. The accumulated rent over 16 years is its own number. Sandra will tell you. I'd guess somewhere around $190,000 in that account. There is a codicil to my will in this box. Read it with an attorney. Do not read it alone. Bertie, you stayed. You stayed when I was a drunk and a fool, and a man who didn't deserve you. You worked double shifts so our boy could have school clothes. You held my hand every Tuesday night when I was shaking in that church basement trying to get sober. I know I said thank you. I don't know if I said it enough. This is the rest of the thank you. This is 30 years of me working quietly so that one day you would be free. Go somewhere beautiful. For the love of God, go somewhere beautiful. All my love, always. Teddy, I read the letter 4 times. Then I opened the attachments. Life insurance, $920,000. Fidelity investment accounts, $1,090,000. Duplex assessed value, $310,000 by current estimates per a tax document from the previous year. Accumulated rental income in the business account, $184,000. Total not counting the house, approximately $2,504,000. I sat in Teddy's chair for a long time. The morning light came through the window at the angle it always did at 10 o'clock. Birds were doing something in the backyard. My house was quiet. Then I picked up the phone and called an attorney. Her name was Denise Quarles, out of an office in Buckhead. She was referred by the financial planner, whose card was in Teddy's box. I told her everything in 45 minutes, speaking quietly with the door to the study closed. Let's start with the codicil, she said. She had a voice like someone who had seen everything and was no longer surprised by any of it. The codicil to Teddy's will stated that while the house would eventually pass to Wesley upon my death, or my voluntary choice to relocate, that transfer was conditional on Wesley providing me suitable housing of my choosing for the duration of my life. At his expense, should I choose not to remain in the house. He tried to protect you, Denise said. He always was a planner. Here's the plain version. Your son cannot force you out. If he attempts to claim the property, or if he fails to provide you adequate housing after pressuring you to leave, the condition is broken and the transfer becomes void. The property reverts to your estate. What if I want to sell it myself? The codicil gives you that right. You can initiate a sale, keep the proceeds, and the conditional transfer becomes null. And my son gets nothing from the house unless you choose to share the proceeds. I drove home that afternoon with a legal pad full of notes and a feeling I had not had in 19 months. Purpose. I did not say a word to Wesley or Kayla. I went upstairs, changed into my gardening clothes, and spent 2 hours putting my rose bushes back to rights. Over the next 4 weeks, I moved quietly. Week 1, I called MetLife about the life insurance, submitted the death certificate and claim form, was told the check would arrive in 30 to 45 days. I opened a new checking account at a different bank, downtown, not the credit union where we had our joint account from when Wesley was in high school. Week 2, I called Sandra Hill about the duplex. She had been depositing the rental income every month for 16 years into a Mosley Holdings LLC account. She had never heard from me because she had been dealing exclusively with Teddy, then with the executor, who had simply maintained the status quo. The account had $192,000 in it. I transferred it to my new account. Week 3, I called the Fidelity accounts, spoke with a financial advisor named Marcus Webb. I had him transfer management authority to my name only, update all contact information to my cell phone, and I set up weekly summary calls. Week 4, I contacted a real estate agent named Patricia Ozzie, referred by Peggy, who had sold 3 houses on our street. Patricia walked through my house on a Thursday morning while Wesley and Kayla were at their co-working space. Mrs. Mosley, she said, standing in my living room, "This is a gem. The bones on this house are extraordinary. We list this at $640. We'll have cash offers in 2 weeks. How long to close? Cash buyer. 30 days, maybe less. List it." We listed it as a pocket listing. Off market, first round. Patricia reached her network of investors and buyers quietly. No sign in the yard. Meanwhile, I had started researching Lisbon. I had never been to Portugal. I had barely been to Europe. But I had a church friend whose daughter had moved to Lisbon 3 years ago and called her mother every week, raving about the light and the food and the affordability and the ease of getting a residency visa as a retiree with passive income. I had saved her daughter's number from a conversation at a potluck 2 years before, because something in the back of my mind had filed it away. I called her. Her name was Celestine, not one of mine, a church acquaintance's daughter, and she picked up on the second ring and talked for 45 minutes without stopping. The cost of living, the safety, the health care, the Tagus River at sunset, an expat community that was warm and real, a visa called the D7 specifically for people with passive income, pension, investments, rental income. I qualified many times over. By the end of the week, I had a video call scheduled with an immigration attorney in Lisbon. By the end of the following week, I had submitted my D7 visa application from the consulate in Atlanta. Through all of it, at dinner, I was pleasant. I asked about Kayla's brand partnerships. I asked Wesley about his job search. I made Sunday pot roast and left them plates. I was warm and ordinary, and they noticed nothing. Then came the conversation. It was a Saturday morning in April. Wesley came downstairs early, which was unusual. He poured coffee and sat across from me at the kitchen table, same as he had done as a teenager when something was on his mind. "Mama," he said, "we need to talk." My hands were steady around my mug. "Kayla and I have been doing a lot of thinking," he said, "about the future, about what makes sense for everyone." He had practiced this. I could tell by the even pace of it, the way he didn't trail off. "This house is a lot for you. The maintenance alone, the HVAC is old, the gutters need work, the driveway is cracking, and you're here alone a lot. More than you should be. I have Peggy next door. I know, and that's great, but..." He stopped, reorganized. "The thing is, we've found a place. It's in Brookhaven. Townhouse, new development, good schools for when we start a family. But we need a down payment. And, Mama, if you sold this house, you'd have enough for a really nice assisted living community. The Brookhaven Senior Living has a waiting list, which means it's in demand, which means it's good. And with the proceeds from the house, how much would I get?" He paused. "Well, it would depend on the sale, and then after expenses. Wesley," I set down my mug, "how much of the house proceeds did you plan to give me?" Silence. "Because this house is mine, baby. Your father and I bought this house in 1992 for $148,000. I have maintained it for 31 years. I have paid the mortgage and the taxes and every repair. I am asking how much of my own house's proceeds you plan to allocate to me." "Of course it would be yours." He said it too quickly. "It's just, the codicil in Dad's will transfers the house to me, so technically, I spoke with an attorney about that codicil last month." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. "The transfer is conditional," I said. "You'd know that if you'd read it carefully, or had your own attorney read it. It requires you to provide me suitable housing of my choosing if I voluntarily choose to relocate. That's the condition. Which means if I sell, the proceeds belong to me. All of them." Wesley had gone very still. "I appreciate that you're worried about me," I said. "I know that's real. You are my child, and I believe you love me in the way you are capable of loving right now. But I want you to know something." I folded my hands on the table. "I am not going to assisted living. I am not a burden to be managed. And I am not going to pretend I didn't hear Kayla on the phone 3 weeks ago, talking to someone about Brookhaven and house comps and what to do with me." He opened his mouth, closed it. "I am not angry," I said, and I surprised myself by meaning it. "I'm just finished. I'm finished being convenient for everyone else." I stood up, picked up my mug, and went upstairs to get dressed. Kayla came home an hour later. She must have read something on Wesley's face, because she appeared in the doorway of my bedroom, which she had never done before. "Albertine," she said, and the use of my full name told me how serious she believed the conversation to be. "I think we got off on the wrong foot. I think we're fine," I said, not looking up from the book I was reading. "I care about Wesley. I care about your family. I just want what's best for everyone." "I know you do." I turned a page. "And I want what's best for me. So we're actually aligned." She stood there another moment, then left. The first offer on the house came 11 days later. $620,000 cash, a couple relocating from California. Patricia called me while I was in the garden. "Do you want a counter?" "Accept," I said. "Close in 30 days. I told Wesley and Kayla at dinner that night. I had made fried chicken, which had been Teddy's recipe, and cornbread, and sweet potato pie, and I waited until we were eating. "I have some news," I said. "I've sold the house. It closes in 30 days. I'll need you to find other arrangements before then." Kayla's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "I've also decided where I'm moving." I took a bite of cornbread. "Lisbon, Portugal. I leave in 31 days. The silence was extraordinary. Wesley set down his fork first. "Mama." His voice had changed. Something in it cracked open. Mama, I didn't know what you meant, I said. And I know what you didn't mean. Both things are true. You can't just, Kayla started. I can, I said. And I have Portugal, Wesley said. You don't speak Portuguese. I don't. Yet. He looked at me for a long time, this son of mine, this boy I had rocked through ear infections and driven to soccer practice and helped fill out college applications at 2 in the morning. He looked at me the way he used to look at Teddy when he was trying to understand something too big for him. Did Daddy leave you money? He asked finally, quietly. Your father spent 30 years making sure I would never have to depend on anyone else's goodwill for the rest of my life. I just didn't know it until recently. Kayla stood up from the table. I heard her go upstairs. Wesley stayed. He sat there for a long time, just the two of us in the kitchen with the sweet potato pie going untouched. Are you punishing me? He asked. No, I said. I am choosing myself. For the first time in a very long time. He nodded slowly, like he was trying to absorb something that didn't fit inside him yet. My D7 visa was approved 14 days later. I got the email at 6:15 in the morning and went out to the backyard with my coffee and stood barefoot in the damp grass and said, out loud, to no one and everyone, Teddy, it's working. The closing on the house happened on a Thursday. The buyers were a couple named the Aldridges, both physicians, who walked through the house one more time before signing and paused in the kitchen. This house feels so loved, the wife said. 31 years, I said. You can feel it. I signed the papers with a steady hand. The net proceeds, after commission and closing costs, were $591,000. Patricia hugged me in the parking lot of the title company. Where are you going? She asked. Somewhere beautiful, I said. Wesley and Kayla were out of the house by the 28th day. They found an apartment in Brookhaven, 1 bedroom, which seemed to be causing some tension. Wesley came by on his last night to help me load the final boxes into storage. We worked for 2 hours without saying much. When the truck was done, we stood in the empty living room. Is there anything I can say? He asked. You can say you'll do better. I'll do better, he said. And his voice was quiet and raw in a way it hadn't been since Teddy's funeral. And I believed him, or believed that he believed it, which for now was enough. Peggy drove me to Hartsfield on a Wednesday morning at 5 a.m., she cried. I held it together until security, and then I found a chair near my gate and let myself have 5 minutes of grief. For the house, for Teddy, for the version of my son I had hoped for and was still waiting on, and then I stood up and walked to the gate. The flight to Lisbon was 9 hours. I flew business class, which Patricia had strongly suggested, and I ate a warm meal and drank 1 glass of good wine and slept for 4 hours, and woke up somewhere over the Atlantic with the kind of clear, quiet feeling that only comes when you've made an irreversible decision and the decision was right. Celestine's daughter, whose name was Yvonne, met me at the airport with a handwritten sign. She was 38, natural hair, paint under her fingernails because she taught art to children on Thursday evenings. She hugged me like family. Welcome to the rest of your life, she said. The apartment was in the Alfama district, which is the oldest part of Lisbon, built on a hillside above the river, cobblestone streets and faded tile and laundry, hanging between buildings and cats, sleeping on every available surface. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that was 400 years old in the walls and freshly renovated inside. High ceilings, wood floors, 2 bedrooms, a terrace that looked out over the Tagus River. The landlady, a woman in her 70s named Senora Alves, met me at the door with a plate of pastéis de nata and said in careful English, "You're home. Welcome." I set down my bags, walked to the terrace. The river was gold in the afternoon light, wide and slow, and on the far bank the land was green and gentle. A streetcar climbed the hill below me. Children were playing somewhere I couldn't see. I sat down on the terrace chair and let myself feel the full weight of what I had done. Then I called Peggy. "I'm here," I said. "Tell me everything," she said. "It's like someone turned up the color," I said. That's the only way I can describe it. Like everything just got more saturated. The first weeks were harder than the beauty made them appear. The language was a wall I kept running into. Not hostile but impenetrable, full of sounds I couldn't quite catch. I downloaded a language app and did 45 minutes every morning. The bread at the bakery around the corner was extraordinary. I pointed at things for the first 2 weeks and nodded a lot, and the woman behind the counter was kind about it. Loneliness hit me in the evenings. I would sit on the terrace with my dinner, and the view would be magnificent, and I would think Teddy would have loved this, and the grief would come fresh for a moment, specific and sharp. But Yvonne brought me into her orbit. She had a group, black women expats, teachers, artists, a retired federal judge from D.C. named Hortense, a former pediatrician from New Orleans named Gwendolyn, a woman who had left a corporate law career in Chicago named Daphne. They met on the first Sunday of every month. When I came to my first dinner, I brought collard greens in a pot I had found in the apartment kitchen, and a sweet potato pie, and they looked at me like I had brought them church. Hortense, who was 71 and had opinions about everything and was right about most of them, tasted my collard greens and said, "You're never leaving." "I wasn't planning to," I said. "Good," she said. "We've been needing a nurse. Gwendolyn is a pediatrician, which is not the same thing." "No offense." "Significant offense," Gwendolyn said. I started volunteering at an English language community clinic 2 days a week. Not because I needed to, but because I needed to be useful. 32 years of nursing is not something you put down like a bag. The work was different, lighter, consultative, translation between medical systems for expats who were overwhelmed. But it was work, and it was mine. I found a piano teacher and started lessons again, something I had given up in my 30s when Wesley was small and time was short. I walked the city in the mornings before the tourists arrived. I learned to say bom dia and obrigada, and eventually, whole sentences that made Senora Alves clap her hands with delight. 4 months after I arrived, my phone rang with a number I recognized, Wesley. I almost didn't answer. Then I thought about the raw sound of his voice in the empty living room, and I pressed accept. "Mama." He sounded tired. Not the tired of someone who had been busy, the tired of someone who had been thinking too hard for too long. "Hey, baby." "I've been in therapy," he said, "twice a week." Mama, I didn't know how to see you as a person. I just knew you as my mother, which sounds like a stupid thing to say, but it's not stupid. I treated you like a resource," he said, "like something that was just there and would keep being there. Kayla pushed for things and I let her because I didn't want to fight, and because I told myself it was fine, you were fine, and I knew the whole time it wasn't right, and I let it keep happening, and Wesley." He stopped. "I know," I said. "I'm sorry, Mama." I looked out at the river. A ferry boat was crossing, white against the gray-green water. "I believe you," I said. "I do, and I am not gone from your life. But I need you to understand something. This," I gestured at the window, at the terrace, at Lisbon, at all of it. "This is not a punishment or a statement. This is my life. This is me finally living my own life, and you are welcome in it if you come as someone who sees me." "I want to," he said. "I want to see you. Can I visit?" "You can in the spring. Come alone." There was a pause. "Is Kayla?" I said, "Come alone?" "Yeah," he said, after a moment. "Yeah. Okay." He came in April. He walked through arrivals at Humberto Delgado Airport, looking thinner and younger somehow, like something he had been carrying had been set down. We hugged for a long moment, and neither of us said anything. I took him across the city on foot for 3 days. We ate custard tarts standing up at the bakery counter. We sat in a fado bar on a Thursday night, and I watched him listen to the music, that particular Portuguese longing that has no direct translation, and watched something move across his face. On the last morning, we sat on the terrace with coffee and the river in front of us. "Tell me about Dad," he said, "the real version, not the story I made up in my head." So I told him about the drinking years, which he partially remembered as a child and partially blocked, about Teddy's redemption, slow and painful and real, about the way Teddy had, in his quiet engineer's way, built a structure of safety around me for 30 years without saying a word. Because he knew words weren't enough and action was what he could give. He knew, I said, that I might need a way out of something I couldn't see yet. And he built me one. Wesley was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I'm a lot like him, aren't I?" "The bad years version, you have time," I said. He found his way, I said. "I'm going to find mine." I believed him. Not completely, not yet, but enough to build on. On his last evening, he gave me an envelope. Inside was a card, handwritten, and a small framed photo of him and Teddy from Wes's college graduation, the two of them squinting into the sun, Teddy's arm around Wesley's shoulders. "I found it in one of the boxes from the house," he said. "I thought you should have it." I set it on the terrace railing and looked at it for a long time. 1 year after I left Decatur, I woke at 6:30 to the sound of the streetcar on the hill and the smell of coffee drifting up from the cafe below. My morning routine: coffee on the terrace, Portuguese practice, walk along the river, clinic on Tuesdays and Thursdays, piano lesson on Wednesdays. Sunday dinners with the group, which had added 2 more members, a retired school teacher from Baltimore named Greta, and a woman who had left her marriage at 62 and her job at 63 and her country at 64, and said she had never once regretted the order. My total assets, conservatively invested, had grown to $2.9 million. I lived on approximately $88,000 a year. Pension, investment income, the passive income from the Glenwood duplex, which I had kept. I saved more than I spent. I had bought into the apartment lease with an option to purchase, which I was planning to exercise. Wesley visited every 4 months. He was still in therapy. He had started a new job, better than the last one. He and Kayla had separated quietly in December, and he had told me with the steadiness of someone who was grieving the right things for the right reasons. He was learning to be something other than what he had been. I was watching it happen and finding, to my own surprise, that I was proud of him for the struggle itself, not just the outcome. Peggy flew over in October. She arrived with 2 bottles of Georgia wine that didn't survive the customs line, but the gesture was the point. We sat on the terrace her first night and ate pastéis and looked at the river, and she said, "Bertie, you absolute force of nature." "Teddy built the foundation," I said. "You built the house," she said. "Give yourself that." I thought about that for a while. One morning, about 14 months in, I woke up and lay there for a moment before getting up, the way you do when you're listening to see what kind of day it will be. I could hear the streetcar, smell the coffee. Somewhere below, Senora Alves was talking to someone in Portuguese, her voice carrying the particular music of a person who has lived in one city for 70 years and knows every inch of it. I got up, made my coffee, went to the terrace. The Tagus was doing what it always does in the morning, catching whatever light there is and turning it into something worth looking at. A container ship was moving toward the sea, slow and enormous. The green hills across the river were still soft with early mist. I raised my cup. "Teddy," I said, in my mind the way I talk to him now, not to the grave but to whatever is still present of him in me. "I found it, the beautiful place. You were right. It was worth it. It's all worth it." The morning answered the way mornings do when you have finally stopped being too busy or too afraid to pay attention. With light. With ordinary, extraordinary light. I had been told my entire life to make myself smaller. To take up less space, to want less, to ask for less, to be grateful for whatever room was made available for me. I had been a good wife and a good nurse and a good mother, and I had confused all that goodness with a permission slip I never needed. My daughter-in-law told me I had a situation. She was right. I did. It just wasn't the situation she thought.